And today I have somebody special, John, who's the founder and CEO of enParadigm. They happen to be one of the early customers of GoFloaters, so that's why I'm even more excited and even more thrilled to have him on this webinar and to kind of cover their journey and how they went about embracing hybrid work as it is, right? And every company has a flavor of hybrid work. So we're going to today cover the enParadigm's version of hybrid work, and more specifically, as a leader, John's perspective into how they went about doing this. So, John, welcome. Happy to have you here, and super excited for this conversation.
Thank you, Shyam, for having me here.
So John, we'll get started with a quick intro about yourself and enParadigm, so that that forms the context for the discussion.
Yeah, so as you may know, enParadigm, we are an experiential learning technology company. And
Right.
we work with enterprise customers across the world. So we work with large global enterprises, and we provide them access to learning journeys on our platforms, which help them, learn various skills required. They could be functional skills, they could be behavioral skills, they could be business skills. And we do this by putting them through adaptive learning journeys on our platform, right? Where they go through simulations, they go through scenario situations, and we use a lot of generative AI and a lot of immersive AI to make these journeys come alive. That's in a
Okay.
nutshell what we do, Shyam.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. And starting off, John, how did when did enParadigm start to embrace hybrid work? Right. What was the trigger point that led to you starting to look at uh, some kind of an office space platform through which you can actually have access to office spaces? What was the trigger point, and how did it all start? Uh, uh, if you could spill some beans on that.
Yeah, so we had started using platforms like Zoom in 2019 itself, right? So that we could connect between our different offices across, different cities in the world. Lucky for us, I think by the time COVID hit, I think we were already prepared for working in some kind of a virtual way. So
Right.
obviously, we had never tried a completely virtual approach. And then I think for the next couple of years, like almost all other organizations in the tech world, we also worked almost on a 100% remote mode.
Right.
And then when the need came to come back to office, because it was a very much of a testing and experimentation phase, and you're not really sure, how work is going to happen. Is the future of work going to be remote? Is it going to be hybrid? Because we're not sure of that question, that is where we were looking for these kind of, go floaters kind of options, right? Where
Right.
you
Right.
take day passes, you book office spaces on the fly, and you already have a very distributed workforce by now. So pre-pandemic, we were working primarily in the metros, but during the
Mhm.
pandemic, our employees started working across many, many different cities. And because of that, we wanted to give them an option where they could just go to any office space near their home and work from there if they wanted to, right? And that's where
Right.
we started working with GoFloaters.
Right. So coming out of the Zoom way of working, what kind of challenges did you face? Right, yourself and the teams face. Right, that kind of led you to believe that being 100% remote is not the way forward for enParadigm. Right. So. Was there were there some anecdotal incidents, or were you seeing certain KPIs being affected by being 100% remote? Uh, what was the what is the business imperative that led you to? Because again, uh, this is an expenditure, right? Having a hybrid office is also an expenditure. So how did you kind of, what is the threshold point that made you believe that you need to get into investing into that for your teams?
Yeah, so clearly there are multiple points over here. The first part is, when you're working fully remotely, everyone else is just a pixel on the screen, and therefore human engagement kind of drops a lot, right?
Right.
And any Zoom kind of a meeting will be very point to point. It's going to start on time, it's going to end on time. So your chai coffee
Right.
chit chat is not going to happen. The human bonding definitely does not happen that way. right? For us, one of the trigger points for coming back was also the fact that customers are coming back to office. Virtual may not really work to drive business. So you need to have people coming back. You need to have the salespeople on the ground, right? Also, you need to have new people. How do you train and induct them into the organization? How do you make them get into your way of working as a company? That is something which is
Right.
not easy for them on a virtual or a remote mode, right? So people who are already productive, who already know their way around the organization, it's easy for them
Right.
to continue working that way, right? I
Right.
personally am a big fan of a work from anywhere kind of mode.
Yeah.
I still do weekends in Cochin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And weekdays I'm typically in some city or the other, right? It's very difficult to predict where I will be on a particular weekday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it has worked quite well for me, right? Personally, for me, I find working from home or working remotely extremely productive
Mm-hmm.
because you're in a fixed location, no waste of time in travel. You stop one meeting, you get into the next meeting, right? So, firstly, I find it very, very, very productive. But
Right.
equally, I find that for new people who just joined, right, for them to get into the ways of working of the organization, it is not an easy challenge, especially for
Right.
people in functions where tacit knowledge is very, very high, right? How do you do this, right? You can't put it
Yeah.
down into a document or a process and tell them. You have to actually
Correct.
demonstrate it. They'll have to see things in action. So
Yeah.
functions which are very customer facing, I think, which are very high interaction functions, I think those are places where pure remote will definitely be a failure point, right? And
Okay.
it's not an advocated way of working. As human beings, I think one of the biggest ways we learn, the reason why human beings learn so much is because we have what we call mirror neurons in the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So mirror neurons are basically when you see someone else doing something, you automatically learn from that, right?
Right.
So you
Right.
need to allow people to see other people working, right? And then you
Absolutely.
learn from that. If you don't see other people working in front of you, you get very limited opportunity. By default, you're reducing the learning scope for the person.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's. I think the tradition of having a mentor mentee, seeing somebody as a role model, right? Kind of following and observing what works in the company, what works in your team, what works in the environment, the role that you are part of, right? I think seeing that certainly re-emphasizes and helps you learn faster. The learning curve is certainly reduced.
True.
I totally agree. And specifically for people, a lot of people who have joined, like a lot of companies, I think I'm sure a good amount of your workforce also was they didn't see anything called office, right? They probably from directly from college, they probably joined a remote company, and then probably even if the second job, third job, it's still remote, right? So they've not seen an organization function in its entirety in their life. So I think that all those things tip off quite well, right? And I think I love the fact that you are a proponent of work from anywhere yourself, right? So obviously, um, you know that it has its own benefits, but you're also able to equally appreciate that it is not for everybody or it is not for every situation, right? So you have to balance that out, and that's the nice balance that enParadigm is kind of trying to do here, right? So before I come into the GoFloaters part or the office, the co-working space part, right? What is the larger strategy or what is the larger plan, right, of that you and your leadership team put forward to kind of how are you going to improve, let's say, this learning curve? How are you going to where tacit knowledge you talked about, right? What is the strategy or what is the overall approach that enParadigm decided to take, right, to transition from 100% remote into the hybrid work model that you currently follow?
So I don't know whether to use the word strategy over here, right? I think this is more of a series of experiments, right?
Perfect.
So
Yeah.
rather than rolling out a grand strategy where you kind of nail the outcomes, you have the process in place, you have the ownership and the metrics in place. I think
Right.
the objective here is more of let's try out a few experiments, let us see what works, let's see what doesn't work. There
Right.
are the
Right.
moment you propose anything in this space, there are a lot of opinions, right? There are opinions saying this is a better approach, that's a better approach, something else is a better approach. The only
Right.
way to
Right.
know what really works is to try it out,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think a lot of our time has gone in uh, uh, you know on just getting the basics of hybrid work, figuring out what actually works on the field, and
Right.
then kind of maybe processifying that. That's how I
Right.
would
Right.
describe it.
No, I think it's
Right.
perfect. I think
So
I mean I'm glad that you said that, right? I think in terms of you don't have a you had a compass in your hand. You don't have Google Maps in your hand, right? You knew where you wanted to go, but how you get there is through a series of experiments that you talked about, right? Any anecdotally, can you talk about a couple of those experiments uh, that maybe like couple that worked and couple that did not work, and you had to change the ways? Anything that comes to your mind, John, at this point in time?
yeah, so I think the early experiments where we said that we want to do, so we started off saying let's go to office once a week, right? So that at least once a week everyone comes together and meets each other. Then it
Right.
became, after maybe 5 6 months, it became twice a week, right? And we experimented with people coming to just one office versus people coming to different offices near their homes, right? And very recently we moved it to thrice a week,
Right.
right? And we are trying to see how is it that we can bring about predictability in that system,
Hmm.
right?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So the predictability piece, so to me, as CEO, I think the biggest question or the biggest need is predictability, right? So if things are predictable, it becomes very difficult for managers to run the system. It becomes very difficult for us to know what
Right.
metrics will be achieved at the end of a certain period of time. So that is what I think
Right.
is most
Right.
important. And what you see today is with hybrid work, the predictability of what is going to happen is actually much lower than either full-time office work or full-time remote work. Right?
Hmm.
You can't, if let's say you're working every week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday from office, right? And that's
Hmm.
what you agreed on. Now you can't control for whether someone will not show up on a Wednesday. There are n number of reasons not to show up on a Wednesday,
Right. Right.
right? I'm not feeling well. Someone in my family is not feeling well. There is some
Hmm.
other emergency, right? There are many cases like that, right?
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to try out different things, and then kind of, I think there are times also when you have to be very clear and say this is how it is, right? I
Hmm.
think there's a temptation for us as managers that if someone say, if even if you agreed that someone will work from office, if there's a reason for them to stay at home but work, as a
Hmm.
manager you would typically prefer that, right? You would prefer that
Yeah.
the person works rather than taking a leave off, right?
Correct.
But sometimes maybe that may not be in the best interest from a culture and discipline and productivity standpoint, right? You don't
Right.
really want a
Right.
person to be half in half out mentally, right?
Hmm.
If you're at
Right. Right.
home and you're attending to something at home, be fully present at home, attend to it
Yeah.
fully, do justice to it, right? Don't
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
switching between work and home continuously. In between,
Hmm.
it's okay. For a few minutes a day, it's okay, right? But not through the full day.
Right. Right.
Similarly, if you're at work, stay at work, right? Don't keep switching back and forth. It's not good from a meaningfulness standpoint. It's not good from a productivity standpoint either.
Right, right. Makes sense. Completely makes sense. So obviously that, I mean, when we spoke last time, that this is an ongoing process, right? This is an ongoing thing at enParadigm. Not just enParadigm, right? Any company is probably, it's a journey that they are trying to take, right? And uh, when like what it also demotivates is like when 20 people sign up to come and 15 show up, right? So the 15 who show up also like appear as fools, right? So hey, I took this I took the train, I took the subway, I took the metro to be here, I took the traffic to be here, but then a few others don't. They have not met their side of the promise, right? So it becomes a little bit of uh, a domino effect on the others as well who have made that effort. So how are you, like, apart from obviously providing a set of rules, right? That you're expecting everybody to follow or expecting that it is enforced, right? What? So maybe before I come to that, right? Uh, Now that you've switched into the three day in office mode and you were at a 2 day in office mode, right? So what kind of work? Uh, let's say we can take any team as an example. Also, it could be a product team, could be your sales team, it could be a marketing team, maybe anything, right? So what kind of aspects of work do you want to get done on those 3 days, right? and what type of work do you want to be done on the other days that they could be working from anywhere, right? So are you planning work that way? Like, I mean, everybody, for, I mean, they talk about purposeful presence at the office, right? So there's very planned agenda as to why you are there, why it has to be done this way and not any other way, right? So how are you able to, what kind of guidelines have you given your managers so that they're able to plan the work accordingly that way?
So I think this is also a very, very challenging thing in today's work environment, right? Because during the whole remote work phase, I think we got used to saying there is an empty slot on someone's calendar, let's just block it,
Right.
right? When people are traveling to work or transitions, during that empty slot, they may actually be in a car, they may be in transit, right? So it's very difficult. And even for a person
Correct.
who actually has physical meetings during a day, if a virtual meeting also pops up in between, it gets very difficult for that person, right? Because it's a mental context change. I'm here to
Correct.
meet
Correct.
a client in an office, and then as soon as I get out of the client meeting, I have to get into a review call on some metrics or on some other accounts. Not easy, right?
Right. Right.
One thing
Right.
I've tried to do for myself is say that all my meetings with my direct reports happen on Monday, right? So on Monday, all my direct report meetings happen. So on that day, I work one full day from home, right?
Mm.
And many times on Tuesday as well. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm traveling, right?
Right.
So anything which requires more, stationary presence, more, peaceful and calm kind of environments, I would want to do it on Monday, Tuesday. While Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I would travel,
Right.
right?
Right.
But again, everyone has their own way of looking at it. There are a lot of people who would love to work from home on Monday and Friday, right? Because it becomes an extended weekend,
Except
right?
weekend. Correct.
So you
Correct.
have a
Correct.
4 day, literally have a 4 day weekend, right? So you can, you don't need to worry about the Monday blues, right? You can finish a Sunday, you can slowly start ramping up on Monday, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you operate at full productivity. Then
Right.
Friday, you start slowing down,
Right.
right?
Right.
And, the way I would see it is, everyone has outcomes to drive, outcomes to
Right.
deliver, right? If you're hitting your outcomes, great. You manage your time the way you can do it.
Correct.
If you're not hitting your outcomes, we will definitely look at why you're not hitting your outcomes. What is the challenge in the way you work? How are you managing your time productively? Can we make it better? Right? I see a lot of instances where people come and say, John, I'm just not having any time. Too many things to do. And I've got too many things on my head. Right? And when I observe the person, what I see is, they go for a meeting, then they step out, they take a 15-minute smoke break, right? And then after 15 minutes smoke break, then they'll take another 15 minutes to book the cab, right? Then they get into the cab. So half an hour is gone, buddy, right? Now, what are you saying? Saying you don't have too many things in you. You just wasted half an hour of your life, right? And if you do that 4 times a day, you already lost 2 hours,
Right.
right?
Right.
So people need to also be self-introspecting in terms of how are they spending their time, right?
Right.
Are they able to get through some of the hygiene aspects quickly, right? Or are they mentally thinking that they are busy working, whereas actually their behavior shows that what they're doing has nothing to do with any kind of work at all? It is actually they are
Right.
in a different zone
Right.
altogether,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we have n number of such situations, right? People coming together, you know. I mean, we recently had a case where, for us to finalize, say, like a particular, event T-shirt, it took a 3-member team 5 days to finalize it.
Okay.
Right now, is that productive work? Not really. Or why do you need 15 man days to design a T-shirt? It's not a big deal,
Right.
right? So
Right.
you should be smart. No, you should know
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to manage and balance your time,
Right.
right? If you don't do that, you will find that that world is too complex for you to operate, right? And you are not able to do enough because you are not personally and managing your time.
Right.
From a learning
Correct.
perspective, also a lot of our simulations that we have are designed to really help people go through, navigate these situations, get some feedback, get some self-realization, right? And self-reflect on how they can manage their time better.
Right. Right. So that way, your own product is something that you leverage quite effectively to help your teams get their A game every day. Right.
Yeah, I think
So
with a product, you can take the horse to the water, right? and
Yeah,
people can at
correct, correct.
least be aware that that there are better ways of doing things. But then of course there's
Agreed.
always a behavioral change that is required to then actually do that in practice, right? And I think
Yeah,
another
very
very
true.
important tool over here is, our, I think a lot of times when you're doing hybrid work, your quality of your people managers is very important, right?
Very
If you
true.
have good
Very true.
strong people managers, they will take care of the teams below them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your people managers are not strong, then that the entire unit's productivity goes for a toss, right?
Very true.
And in
Very true.
hybrid work, that becomes even more relevant because there's a lot more chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
One day I'm at home, one day I'm at office, one day I'm in transit, right? So how will I stay productive? How does my manager
Right.
know that I'm productive,
Right.
right?
Right.
What is my manager measuring me on? How is my manager giving me feedback? How are they encouraging and motivating me? All
True.
these become important questions, more important in a hybrid work environment.
Very true, very true. And I love the fact that you spoke about outcomes and measuring outcomes and constantly keeping a tab of that to ensure if you need to have any interventions at an individual level or at a team level, right? So how does this all roll up, right? Are you using any specific methodologies to define these out? Because I think the biggest companies that struggle, the biggest change management struggle that people have, right? And specifically, there are companies that are now transitioned from in-office to being hybrid or in-office to being remote first, right? So the biggest struggle they face is in kind of from presenteeism to tracking outcomes, right? From being like clocking 8 hours in a day to tracking outcomes, right? So what are the two or three learnings that you've had, or how do you say it? Maybe tips that you have in kind of defining outcomes for your teams. Like, how do you, for example, how do you define outcomes for your immediate direct reports? Like, how do you quantify that, and how do you measure that as a leader?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, like you rightly said, defining outcomes is not necessarily as simple and straightforward as it seems, right? Many times, you are ending up driving the wrong metric and the metric is not adding value, right? So what
Right,
we
right,
do is,
right,
we say, okay, these are our top, three or four overall business objectives, right? So we have a system called five metrics, that as a company, there are, from getting an order to getting cash, right? It's called the order to cash cycle, right?
right,
So you get a work order, then you get a signed work order, then you freeze the deployment, then you actually do the deployment, you bill, and you collect, right? So there are six
correct.
metrics in that chain,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Right,
for us at the top, these six metrics are what we measure from a business perspective. And then these six metrics roll down to different functions. And then within functions, people hold a part of that metric, right? And there are
right,
weekly reviews done on these metrics, right? These are from the
okay,
business functions perspective,
correct.
right? So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, the sales team would have work orders and signed work orders, right? The deployment and delivery teams will have freezing and rollout kind of targets. The finance team will have billing and collection targets. So that's how you kind of drill down, right? When it comes
Okay.
to more creative functions, right, like marketing, product, content,
Mm-hmm.
design, there you can't follow this kind of an approach, right? Because
Right,
it's not like every day is the same for them. Every day is different in terms of what they're trying to
correct.
achieve. So there
Right,
you have your product roadmaps, right? You break down your roadmaps into maybe features. You break down features into milestones, right? You work with engineering to make those milestones happen. So there the process is typically a lot more creative, collaborative, and
right.
I would also say it's potentially a lot more chaotic as well,
Yeah, true, very true.
right?
Yeah,
So there the way you look and you measure and manage become very, very different
yeah, yeah,
over
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. So I'll move
Yeah,
on to the last
yeah.
couple of things that I had, John, for you. One is that in all this, again, again, I'm also taking this as an opportunity to hear feedback from the horse's mouth on GoFloaters, right? So in this entire transition of being from 100% remote to 1 day to 2 days to now 3 days, how is GoFloaters? Again, GoFloaters are a similar thing. How is that kind of becoming a part and parcel of your experimentation strategy, right? I'm not saying strategy, but then there is a strategy to experiment, right? So how is this allowing you to run your experiments, right? What does it what has that given you as tools to play around with, and where do you think the gaps still lie, right? in terms of like, hey, I would love to do this, but then co-working industry or a platform like GoFloaters is not letting me do this, right? So anything that you have to say in terms of both, in terms of what it has allowed you to accomplish, and what are the asks that you have from us?
Yes, I think good question. So, from what it has allowed us to accomplish, clearly, GoFloaters as a platform has really helped us do the experimentation. Rather than us talking to each co-working provider on our own, reaching out, booking, planning, scheduling, the process has made it very easy, right? And especially from an
Right,
employee perspective, realizing the billing, right? That I just book and I don't have to pay out of pocket and then get it reimbursed. I think that's a lot of friction reduction for an employee, right? So that's number one.
right,
So I
right,
think that the last 2 years, I think GoFloaters has really helped in the solution that you put together made it very easy for companies like us who were experimenting with where should we work from. Secondly, I
correct,
think beyond the app itself, I think the support that the team has extended in terms of helping us find the right workspaces, negotiate certain things on our behalf with maybe
right,
co-working providers, help us understand where there are better options to work out of. I think
right,
some of
right,
these have been very, very good support
right,
aspects, right?
right,
In terms of challenges, I'm clearly seeing that now, there is still a lot of dynamism in the space, right? So if you're working in a particular space, it's difficult for us to predict whether next week that space will be peaceful and quiet or will it be very crowded,
right,
right?
right,
Similarly, it's difficult to predict whether the place is going to play loud music or whether it's not going to play, because different companies and different employees are coming from different companies. So some people want music, some people don't want music. One thing I have observed is that when you have people, let's say you have 15, 20 people in a particular location, and there are 100 people working there, it's difficult for your 15, 20 people to kind of build some kind of a common culture
true,
and a common kind of way of doing and being things, right? And it becomes
yeah,
very, very, again, unpredictable, right?
mhm,
So you're not sure, who's coming at what time, who's leaving at what time. Did someone come in today or not? Did they not come in? So as a manager, it's difficult for you to kind of, manage the situation, right? And then, you have to kind of basically educate your teams and tell them this is the outcome that I want and I want you to deliver this outcome. The rest
right,
is up to you,
mhm,
right? So these are all challenges that I've seen in the whole co-working space at the moment, right?
right,
And
right,
I think co-working players also, I think the initial, the fees for a day pass are fairly low,
mhm,
right? But the moment you want to book like a cabin or a fixed office space, the fees are very different,
right,
right?
right,
So that I don't think that whole price discovery in that space has happened yet. I think it's still very experimental over
true,
there.
yeah, yeah,
So I would say the space is still very nascent,
yeah.
and we still haven't reached maturity in the way that things have to happen.
No, absolutely, I'm with you on this. We are going. I mean, specifically in the last 6 months, there's been quite a bit of experiments that people have done. Sometimes there's more inventory in the market. Sometimes suddenly there's less inventory in the market, right? Suddenly, like you have uh, enterprise customers coming into the co-working segment, which they were not doing as much. So they, everybody's trying to figure this out, as you rightly said, and that transitionary phase is always a little bit more chaotic than a predictable space that you expect it to have, right? And I think I clearly resonate and empathize with whatever you said there, right? So now the last, and again, one thing I would say, like we've always been there. We are trying to solve one puzzle at a time. So uh, certainly we are putting the efforts to kind of get what is the ideal workspace and work environment for every employee of yours. So we'll hopefully get there sooner than later. So now the last, John, that I want to ask is like the crystal ball. So I want you to like crystal. I mean, look at the crystal ball on two things, right? One is in paradigm itself. Uh, where do you where does the compass tell you where you are going, right? So you from not just in terms of workplace, but in terms of the entire hybrid the work model itself, right? So what do you anticipate will be the direction in which this will go in the next, let's say, 6 months, right? Maybe 1 year is too long a time. But then the second part of the crystal ball that I want to hear from you is like, as maybe even we can take just the knowledge work industry, or even within that startups, or even within that SaaS as a segment, right? Where do you see, what do you see will be the trend that we will kind of see in terms of workplaces, work culture, and in general flexibility at workplace? So one, and paradigm, and two, industry as a whole.
I think if you look at, see, it's very difficult to predict what is going to happen in the next 6 months, right? But if you look at a more long-term direction, what you see is that there's a lot more clarity about what is meaningful at work, okay, and how to make sure that work has meaning for people,
Right,
right? And I think there's a lot more clarity in the work environment today. For example, you used to have very highly competitive stack ranking appraisal systems. In most companies, those kind of systems are not there now,
right, right,
right? Because there is an understanding that there is something called intrinsic motivation. There is something called a flow of work, right? Creative jobs require a certain kind of work environment,
right,
right? Also, there are times when you have to treat people as adults and not as children, right? Even with your
right, right,
employees, if you treat someone as an adult, they'll behave like an adult. Yeah, you treat them like children, they'll behave like children,
right,
right?
right,
So I think there's a lot more clarity about all these aspects today in the work environment, right? How do
right,
you
right,
motivate people, etc., etc. So I find the work environment overall becoming better. I also find that young people are far more willing to question things, right? Many
true,
times what happens is that that you're scared of what's going to happen to you, so you don't have even form your point of view on whether a work practice is appropriate or inappropriate,
right,
right? You
right,
don't even question it, you just kind of abide by it,
right.
right? But today I think people are more and more questioning some practice, and I believe those practices have to be questioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, whoever has got more money and more muscle will win the game, right? It's as
Right,
simple as that, right? But this also applies both ways, right? We have had many employees who, I mean, we've seen cases where people fake fudge offer letters, right? They fudge salary slips,
mm,
right? We've seen cases where people say that that sign up for a notice period, right? But then they disappear overnight, right? And I mean, that's really not the way to work, right? There is a way of doing work, right? There is something called a notice period. There's a reason why there's a notice period,
mm-hmm.
right? So we need to all agree and align on the rules of the game, and we need to respect the rules of the game. And
Right,
any flexibility that is needed has to be designed into the rules of the game, right?
mm-hmm.
Whether it is in terms of things like notice periods, or whether it is in terms of things like, how many days can I work from home in a month, or if I have an emergency, what can I do? What are the options available to me?
Right,
I think
right,
we can quite easily design these into the rules of the game, right? And then let's follow the rules of the game. That's my personal preference, right? I'm not someone who is a big fan of everyone ad hoc, deciding based on whims and fancies. I think it's very difficult to run a business that way.
absolutely. I think one constant thing that I what in all your questions is that predictability, right? So how do you? Okay, it's not my way, right? Okay, you and let's the two of us sit together and design something that's predictable, right? So I think I see that as a recurring theme in all of your answers, right? Figuring out the
True.
predictability in business growth, figuring out the predictability in talent retention, in talent scaling up to deliver, right? Predictability in the workspace environment or the work environment itself, right? So I think a lot of that is aligning to that theme. I think that seems to be the what is it, the target that you're, or the goal towards which you are trying to move, right? So in kind of bringing that predictability in various aspects of it, right? And thereby, if a lot of these building blocks align, then obviously your growth and your targets are also going to be aligned to that predictability. So I think
Yeah.
so I could see that, and kind of which also gives me the thought that all of your answers are so well thought through, right? Because they're all, like, how do I say, right? They're all dotting back to the same core of predictability, right? So
Yeah.
thank you,
So this
John.
is something that
Sorry,
we've been thinking about for a long time, right?
right,
And this whole hybrid work thing, it's not that it's jumped on us today, right? It's been a 2-year journey, more than a 2-year journey,
Right.
right? And at least for our employees at enParadigm, I believe that we all choose to work at enParadigm, right? We come
Very
to
true.
work because we have made a conscious choice that this is where we want to work,
Correct.
right? And therefore, let's kind of discuss, debate, align on how we want to work. Let's agree on that, right? And let's try and maximize the pie,
Right.
right?
Right.
If we work together, if we collaborate, the pie is going to be bigger, right? Everyone benefits. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about enParadigm, but I think any company, right, that's really the same case,
Very true.
right?
Very true.
And I
Yeah.
think that's far better than everyone trying to just fight their own battles and then win their own uh, objectives, right?
Correct. Correct.
So I may win and then you may lose, right? I think, but if we work together, we both will win, right? So that's
Right.
obviously a much better outcome. But
Mm-hmm.
and that is where when new people come in. So when you have people who are already in the system for some time, I think this understanding is very much there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, we have had the fortune, especially over the last 1 year, having a lot of our ex-employees coming back to us, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they were people that we would have ideally not wanted to have left us, but then they came back consciously, right? And when they came back a second time, they were even more conscious because now they've experienced us. They know what
Yeah.
is good and bad here, what is possible, what is not possible here. They've gone to other places, they've experienced there. Now they're coming back more educated, right? That okay, now
Correct.
they're making
Correct.
an even more conscious choice to work here,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that's that. And then when people, I've seen that when people come in with that extra consciousness, their alignment in terms of overall objectives, their method of work, their quality of work, everything goes up,
Yeah. For
right?
sure. For
And
sure.
that
Yeah.
becomes very important. And I wish that was the case even when anyone kind of joins a company first time, right? I think too many people just join a company, just to get some kind of a paycheck at the end of the month. While obviously getting paychecks is important, I think that's a very hygiene goal,
Right.
right? It's terrible
Very true.
when someone just comes and sign up. I got an offer. Let me join. After 1 month, I'll then figure out whether I want to work here or not, right? I think it's a waste of
Yeah.
time and
Yeah.
money and energy for everyone involved, right? So
Right. Right.
I think that also ties into this whole way of work. It's all part of that same larger equation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. No, absolutely, absolutely with you. I think that in a way, creating this hybrid workplace is probably helping you or helping these new joinees get to the essence of being an enParadigm employee much faster than they would have figured it out being 100% remote, right? I think that's a way, and that's another way in which hopefully the percentage of those people reduce with time, and the ownership and the commitment gets triggered off much earlier in their career. I mean, their alignment with you, right? So John, extremely thankful for you to be so very uh, candid, right? Because like it's hard to say that hey, we have these are the problems, right? So it's very easy for somebody to talk about we have done this, we have accomplished this, and all that. Somebody to kind of be very humble and say that I don't know, right? I'm doing these experiments, right? Some of these will go right, some of these will not go right, but this is my goal, right? Goal is to bring this predictability in. Goal is to uh, uh, come up with a collaborative contract with my teams that both of us sign up for, right? It's not my way or highway, right? So I think a lot of these things truly echo the fact that you are a very people-centric leader, right? Obviously, you have business goals to achieve, so you're trying to balance both of that. So thank you for coming on, sharing that with you, and we are extremely grateful to have associated with you and continue to serve your teams. And like I said, uh, glad that we could be that foundational platform on which you could do these experiments, and hopefully in the future also we are able to support you on all those experiments as they unravel themselves.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Shyam.
Thank you.
Have a great
Have a
day
nice
to
evening
you.
ahead. Bye bye.